Have you ever wondered why the harder you try to connect with someone emotionally distant, the more they pull away? What if I told you that everything you're doing to get closer to an avoidant person is actually pushing them further into their shell? Today, I'm going to reveal a counterintuitive communication style that flips the script entirely. This isn't about playing games or manipulation. This is about understanding the psychology of avoidant attachment and speaking their emotional language. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to communicate in a way that makes avoidants feel safe, intrigued, and genuinely drawn to you. Let's dive in. Here's the paradox that most people miss. Avoidants are magnetically attracted to people who don't need them emotionally. Think about it. Avoidants develop their attachment style as a survival mechanism. Early in life, they learned that depending on others emotionally leads to disappointment or overwhelm. So they built walls, they became self-sufficient fortresses. When you communicate from a place of emotional independence, where you're genuinely okay, whether they respond or not, something remarkable happens. You stop triggering their core fear of being consumed or trapped. Instead of saying, I really need to talk to you about us, try this energy. I've been thinking about something interesting. When you have time, I'd love to hear your perspective. Notice the difference. The first creates pressure and obligation, avoidant kryptonite. The second creates curiosity and preserves their autonomy. You're inviting, not demanding. You're interested, not needy. Avoidants are obsessed with people who have their own rich inner world, their own goals, and their own emotional stability. When you communicate that you're complete with or without them, you become infinitely more attractive because you're not asking them to be their emotional life support system. The energy behind your words matters just as much as the words themselves. When you text or speak from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, avoidants can feel it. They're highly attuned to emotional pressure because they've spent their lives avoiding it. But when you genuinely have other things going on in your life, other sources of joy and fulfillment, your communication naturally takes on a lighter quality. You're sharing rather than seeking. You're offering rather than taking. This fundamental shift in your communication foundation changes everything about how an avoidant perceives you. They start to see you as someone who enhances their life rather than someone who needs them to complete yours. And that distinction is absolutely everything when it comes to earning their attention and keeping their interest over the long term. This one sounds simple, but it's devastatingly effective. Learn to embrace strategic silence. Avoidants are overwhelmed by constant communication, texting all day, needing immediate responses, filling every silence with words. This is their nightmare. But here's what they won't admit in the silence. They start thinking about you. When you give avoidant space without drama, without passive-aggressive comments, without, okay, check-ins, you do something they rarely experience. You make them feel safe and curious at the same time. Try this communication pattern, engage meaningfully, then disappear gracefully. Have a great conversation, then don't text for a day or two. Share something interesting, then go live your life. What happens in that space? The avoidance mind starts working. What are they doing? Why aren't they chasing me like everyone else? Do they not care, or are they just different? This isn't playing hard to get. It's being genuinely engaged with your own life. The silence communicates something powerful. I enjoy you, but I don't need constant validation from you. That message is catnip to avoidance because it challenges their assumption that closeness always equals suffocation. Most people make the critical mistake of filling every gap in communication with more words, more explanations, more reassurance. They panic when they don't hear back immediately. They double text, triple text, and eventually send the dreaded, "Did I do something wrong?" message. Each of these actions confirms to the avoidant that you're exactly like everyone else who's tried to trap them with emotional neediness. But when you can sit comfortably in silence, when you can go hours or even days without needing to hear from them, you communicate a level of self-possession that's incredibly rare and deeply attractive. The strategic use of space allows the avoidant to miss you, to wonder about you, feel the absence of your presence rather than being overwhelmed by its constant pressure. In those quiet moments, they're not feeling relieved that you've finally given them space. They're starting to feel curious about when they'll hear from you again. And that curiosity is the beginning of genuine interest. Avoidants are intensely uncomfortable with emotional flooding. If you lead every conversation with feelings, needs, and emotional processing, you'll watch them shut down in real time. But here's the secret: avoidants actually want connection. They just need it delivered differently. Communicate in their language logic, facts, observations, and practical solutions. Instead of, I feel like you're distant lately and it makes me anxious, try, I noticed we haven't connected much this week. What's your bandwidth like? See the shift. You're addressing the same issue, but removing the emotional intensity that triggers their defense mechanisms. Avoidants respect directness without drama. They appreciate when you can identify a problem and discuss it like two adults solving a puzzle together, rather than two emotions crashing into each other. This doesn't mean you never share feelings. It means you frame them as information rather than demands. I've noticed I feel more connected when we have quality time together. Is data they can work with. Why don't you ever make me feel loved is an attack they'll retreat from. When you communicate factually and calmly, avoidants start to trust that emotional conversations won't ambush them with chaos. And that trust, that's when they start leaning in. The key is understanding that avoidants aren't emotionally stunted or incapable of deep feeling. They're simply wired to process emotions differently. They need time, space, and a sense of control over the emotional landscape. When you present your observations and feelings as neutral information rather than urgent crisis requiring immediate emotional labor, you give them room to actually consider what you're saying instead of immediately activating their defense systems. Think of it like this. If you want to have a meaningful conversation with someone who speaks a different language, you don't just speak louder in your own language and hope they understand. You learn their language, or at least find a translation method that works for both of you. For avoidance, that translation method is moving from emotional expression to practical observation, from dramatic declarations to calm assessments, from we need to talk energy to something worth discussing when you're ready energy. This is the communication hack that changes everything. Explicitly validate their need for independence. Most people communicate the opposite. They say things like, I wish you'd open up more, or why do you need so much alone time? These statements, however well-intentioned, confirm the avoidant's deepest fear. You want to change them. Flip the script. Try statements like, I love that you have such a rich inner life, or your independence is actually one of the things I admire about you, or take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. When you verbally celebrate their autonomy instead of criticizing it, something profound shifts in their psychology. You become the first person who doesn't see their self-sufficiency as a problem to fix. This communication style is magnetic because it's so rare. Avoidants are used to partners who view their need for space as rejection. When you communicate that you SE their autonomy and respect it, you differentiate yourself from everyone else who's tried to change them. And here's the beautiful irony: when avoidants feel their independence is safe with you, they voluntarily choose to get closer. They pursue what they're not being chased by. The validation of their autonomy doesn't just make them comfortable, it makes them curious about whether you might actually be someone they can trust with their inner world. Throughout their lives, avoidants have encountered endless criticism for their attachment style. They've been called cold, distant, emotionally unavailable, commitment phobic, and a dozen other labels that make them feel fundamentally broken or wrong. When you come along and communicate that their independence isn't a flaw but a feature, that their self-sufficiency isn't something to fix but something to admire, you shatter their expectations completely. They're not used to being accepted as they are. They're certainly not used to being celebrated for the very traits that others have condemned. This acceptance creates a psychological safety that's absolutely intoxicating to someone who spent their whole life defending their right to be themselves. When you communicate appreciation for their autonomy, you're essentially telling them that they don't have to fight you, defend themselves from you, or convince you that their way of being is valid. Avoidants hate feeling controlled or told what to do. Statements can feel like directives, questions feel like invitations. Instead of, what does quality time look like to you? Instead of, you're being distant, try, I'm curious what's on your mind lately. Instead of, you never share your feelings, ask, what helps you feel comfortable opening up? Questions do three powerful things. First, they give control back to the avoidant. They get to choose how to respond rather than defend against an accusation. Second, they communicate genuine curiosity rather than judgment. You're seeking to understand, not to fix or criticize. Third, they create space for the avoidant to self-reflect without pressure. Often, Avoidants don't even know what they're feeling until they're given safe space to explore it. This communication style makes avoidants obsessed because it's the opposite of what they expect. They're bracing for demands and criticism. When they get curiosity and respect instead, their walls start to crack. The power of questions lies in their ability to shift the entire dynamic of a conversation from confrontation to collaboration. When you make a statement about what you need or what they're doing wrong, the avoidant immediately feels backed into a corner where their only options are to defend themselves, withdraw, or comply resentfully. None of these outcomes lead to genuine connection. But when you ask an open, genuinely curious question, you're inviting them into a shared exploration rather than issuing an ultimatum. You're acknowledging that their perspective matters, that their inner experience is valid and worth understanding. Questions also force you as the communicator to slow down and actually listen rather than just waiting for your turn to make your next point. For avoidants, being truly heard without judgment is an incredibly rare experience. Most of their previous relationships have involved people who asked questions as a setup for criticism, or who pretended to listen but were really just gathering ammunition for their next emotional attack. When you ask questions and then genuinely receive the answers without trying to fix, change, or argue with what they share, you create a communication environment that feels revolutionary to them. Here's the final and most counterintuitive communication secret: always leave them a clear exit, and they'll never take it. Avoidants are terrified of being trapped. The moment they feel there's no way out of a conversation, a relationship, or an expectation, they bolt. But when you communicate that they're always free to leave, something fascinating happens. They stay. Try phrases like, "If this isn't what you want, I completely understand," or "There's no pressure here. We can figure this out or not. Either way is okay," or "You're free to walk away anytime. I want you here, but only if you want to be here." This communication style is psychological genius because it eliminates the avoidant's primary anxiety entrapment. When the exit is always visible and you're genuinely okay with them taking it, they don't feel the need to run. Most people communicate the opposite. They try to lock things down, create commitments, and eliminate uncertainty. With avoidance, that strategy backfires spectacularly. When you communicate freedom, you create safety. And in that safety, avoidants finally feel able to choose connection without fear. They become obsessed with the person who never made them feel caged. The exit strategy paradox works because it addresses the core wound of the avoidant attachment style. At some point in their development, avoidants learned that relationships mean losing themselves. That closeness requires sacrifice of their autonomy. That love comes with strings that slowly strangle their independence. Every relationship then has been filtered through that lens. When someone tries to hold them tighter, they reflexively pull away because tightness equals danger in their psychological framework. When you communicate that the door is always open, that they're with you by choice rather than obligation, you remove the very thing that makes them want to flee. The irony is profound. The more clearly you communicate that they're free to go, this isn't reverse psychology or a manipulation. It's genuine respect for their autonomy taken to its logical conclusion. You're saying, in essence, I want to be with you, but only if you want to be with me, and I'm completely at peace either way. That level of emotional security and non-attachment is incredibly attractive to avoidants because it proves you're not going to consume them, control them, or make their autonomy contingent on staying in relationship with you. Understanding how to communicate with avoidance isn't about manipulation, it's about respect. It's about recognizing that not everyone processes emotions the same way, and that's okay. Communication style that makes avoidance obsessed is really just one that honors their psychology, emotional independence, strategic space, logical framing, autonomy, celebration, curious questioning, and freedom to choose. Master these 6 communication keynotes, and you'll find that the avoidant person in your life starts leaning in rather than pulling away. Because you've done something extraordinary, you've made connection feel safe instead of suffocating. If this resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more psychology content, and drop a comment below which of these keynotes surprised you the most. Until next time, communicate wisely.